Hello everybody, this is Miss Burchett. The genetics questions that you guys completed were not that great, so I wanted to go over how to completely and correctly answer some of those questions. So we're just going to start at the top and go all the way down. If you want to pause this video because you got this one right and didn't get the next one right, you're welcome to kind of skip through, but if you'd like to see the whole thing to see how these are completed, if you did have questions about them or weren't quite sure, feel free to watch the whole thing. So for the first one, deafness in dogs is a recessive trait. So what we mean by recessive trait is that it takes both of the traits in order for that to show up. Let's say you wanted to breed your male heterozygous Dachshund to your female homozygous dominant Dachshund. All of those words mean something, and they tell you about the alleles or the letters that are representing the genes that they're giving. So for this, it's a recessive trait. It does not say that it's a sex-linked recessive trait, so we're just going to use the capital and lowercase letters to represent our alleles. You want to breed a male heterozygous Dachshund to a female homozygous dominant Dachshund. Deafness is a recessive trait, so we are going to show it by using that, which means that in order for a dog to be deaf, he has to have both of the lowercase letters or both of the recessive alleles in order for that to show up. It says that the male is heterozygous. That means it is one dominant and one recessive allele, one that he got from each of his parents. And then the female is homozygous dominant, which means they are both dominant. Homo means the same. So homo dominant is going to be two capital letters to show the two dominants. What we would do with that is we would use that Punnett square or that test cross, whichever you want to call it, to find out what those babies would be. So we'd have capital, capital. You just bring the traits down and over in each one of those boxes to find out what the traits would be. All right. Now that we have that, we can answer the questions. Would you have any deaf puppies? No, you would not. In order for you to have deaf puppies, it would have to be the lowercase and lowercase because it's a recessive trait. What are the possible genotypes of each of the puppies in your litter? So even though I've done the cross, if I'm answering the question, I'm going to say that my possible genotypes of the litter are going to be capital D, and then capital D, lowercase d for this litter. Those are the two possible genotypes. On to the next one. Black fur in guinea pigs is dominant over white fur. So black is the dominant, and white fur is going to be the recessive, so it's going to be shown as that. What letter you choose does not really matter as long as you know the difference between your dominant and recessive. What is the probability that you will have a white guinea pig? So we are looking for our white, which for us is going to be lowercase b for the letters that I chose. If you mate a white guinea pig, so if it is white, it has to be lowercase and lowercase because white is the recessive trait, with a heterozygous guinea pig. So the white is the recessive, and then heterozygous means one of each. So this is a black guinea pig that carries the recessive white trait. And then we're going to cross those. Capital B, lowercase b, capital B, lowercase b, lowercase, 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 lowercase. So what is the probability that I will have a white guinea pig? It's going to be 2 out of 4 or 50%. So my answer for the question would be 50%. In summer squash, white fruit color, capital W, so it's showing you the letters to use for this, is dominant over yellow fruit color, which will be the lowercase w. In disc-shaped fruit, capital D, is dominant over the sphere-shaped fruit, lowercase d. If a squash plant true breeding for a white disc fruit, which means that it is true breeding means that you have a homozygous. So white is our capital W, and it's true breeding, so double capital, that is the same thing as homozygous. And disc fruit, which means it's going to be capital D for the disc fruit, the dominant trait for that, is crossed with a plant that is true breeding. Again, that means homozygous, but for this one, it is the lowercase trait, still homozygous, but it's going to be homozygous recessive for yellow's fruit and a sphere shaped. So for this first one, it is asking us to do this first generation cross between this one and this one. And then it has what will the phenotypic and genotypic ratios be for generation F1 and then F2. So for this here, you have two different traits. Whenever we have that, we have to do a dihybrid cross, which is one of the big 16 box ones. You can write all of this out if you would like to and see what the answer would be, but I know that if I have everything the same on these, then the only trait that this parent is giving is going to be a capital W and a capital D. So this one over here, the only traits that they are giving would be lowercase w and lowercase d, which means that if we put these two together, all of my generation 1 people would be, I'm going to write it down here, for A would be a capital W, lowercase w, capital D, lowercase d. So all of the ones in this generation, the genotypic ratio would be this. I also have to answer the question for the phenotypic ratio. This means that they are going to be white and they are going to be disc shaped. All of those babies, because this person can only give a capital and this person can only give a lowercase for its traits. For the next generation, we are mating the babies of this generation. So that means we have to do the big dihybrid cross. So I can show you how you would set that up, but I'm not going to write everything out here. So that would mean that you're going to have to do that thing that you do in math, where you match up all of the possible combinations in order to get the traits that you would see. So for this, I'm going to have one trait for each of the alleles, which are possibilities that this parent could share with its children. So they can give a dominant and a dominant, they can give a dominant and a recessive, they can give a recessive and a dominant, and we have to show all of the possible combinations of that. It is matching up this generation, which has all of the same things, with itself. So two plants from this first generation are all going to be the same, which means coming down the side over here, I'm going to have the same traits, a capital and a lowercase, a capital and a capital, and so on down the line. And then I would do my big dihybrid cross. So for this first one up here, which is the only one that I'm going to fill out, is going to be capital W, capital W, capital D, capital D. If I were to finish filling out, which you should for this question, what I'm going to have at the end for my, I'll have my genotypic and phenotypic ratios. So you would write all of that out. I know that whenever I have a completely heterozygous dihybrid cross, for my B, I'm going to have a 9, 3, 3, 1 for my phenotypic ratio, which means that 9 of them are going to have both of the dominant traits, 3 of them are going to have 1 dominant and 1 recessive, and then 1 dominant, 1 recessive. And then this one over here, that one by itself, is going to be just like the original parent was with the 2 recessive traits. All right. For this number 4 down here, list one example of each of the following of the genetic disorders. You could have listed a whole bunch of different types, so long as those were correct, that's fine. I had somebody to find something that I haven't heard of before, so I had to look it up, but as long as one of them is autosomal recessive, which means that it is not connected to the X trait, then it can be that disorder. If it is connected to the X chromosome, then it is going to be an X-linked trait. All right. For number 5, if a woman is a carrier for color blindness, stop right there. Anytime we are talking about color blindness or male pattern baldness or some of those other disorders that we have that are sex-linked, we are going to need to use those X's and Y's and attach those traits to them. So if a woman is a carrier for color blindness, that means she is going to be capital X and capital X. And then she's going to have a trait that's attached to it. So you can use the little ticks or you can use the letters, whatever you feel most comfortable with. If a woman is a carrier, that means she is carrying that trait on one of her X's and she's not carrying it on the other. If the child has a child with a man who is not colorblind, so if he is not colorblind, then he is going to have the normal trait. So for mine, I'm going to have X be the normal, and then I'm going to have X with a little tick mark beside it be carrying that trait. And for this one, it's going to be color blindness. Remember, for all of your sex-linked traits, these are recessive, so as long as it has to have both of them show up. Another way that you could do this, because it's a recessive trait, is have a capital C for your normal and then a lowercase c to show color blindness. So we can do that over here too. Either way you do it is perfectly fine, as long as you know the difference and you understand what you've written down and how those connect together. So once we do the cross, we're not only going to find out what the possibility of having these children would be, we're going to see exactly what type of children, whether they're male or female, have the trait. So this makes it really important for you to read your question and make sure that you're answering the question that's asked. So the question that is asked is, what are their chances of having a child with the disorder? If the question said, instead of child, what is their chances of having a girl with the disorder, then you would have to do your math differently. Here's what I mean. Again, in order for you to have a sex-linked trait show up, you have to have both of the recessive traits there in a female, or you just have to have one of them show up in the male. The males only have one chance because they only have one X. The females have to have both of the bad genes from both of the parents in order for them to get that trait. So I only have one child here that only shows the recessive trait, and that is a male. If I'm answering this question, what are their chances of having a child with the disorder? It's going to be 1 out of 4, which is 25%. That would be my answer. If this question said, what are their chances of having a son with the disorder? That might change my answer. Out of my boys, which would be just these two right here, I'd have a 50% chance of having a son that had color blindness, because of all of my boys, 50% of the boys, 1 out of 2, is going to be colorblind. All right, on to the blood type. A woman with type O blood has a child with type A blood. So here's my box. You can set this up however you want to. I'm looking for something in here with an A. That's what I'm looking for. My woman over here has a type O blood, so I'm going to represent that as little i's. There's lots of different ways for you to write that out, or you could just do O's, however you want to do that. And she claims that the father has type B blood. If he has type B, he's either BB or he's BO, but he has to have a B over here. Is this possible? And you can look at this and see, if she gave him an O, that means she gave him nothing on her blood. There's no alleles on that blood type. If he is a B, he has to give a B to this child. So if he gave that, then this child would be AB or it would be B. So this is not possible. She is sleeping with the milkman. Okay, so the answer to this question is no. The next one has you draw a pedigree. So a pedigree, remember, are where you show circles and squares and lines to show relationships. So for this, a female is going to be a circle, a male is going to be a square. And for these, if it is open, that means that they do not have the trait. You can also have it half full, to where this person would be a carrier for the trait, or if they're filled in, that means they have the trait. So let's see what we're dealing with. We have a married couple, so that is going to be a circle and a square in our story because they have children. And if they biologically have these children and not in vitro fertilization from other sperm or eggs, then they are going to have these children with their genetics. Have 4 children, 3 of which are boys. So we have 3 boys down here. Where you put them does not matter. And 1 girl. Both parents are carriers for Tay-Sachs disease. So our disease that we're looking at is Tay-Sachs, and I'm going to fill in half of it because this is a way to show that these people are carriers. They do not show the trait. They do not suffer from any symptoms of this disease, but they are able to pass it on to their children. The little girl and one of the boys has the disorder. So this little girl over here is affected, and this boy over here is affected. It might be this boy down here. It doesn't really matter as long as you show one boy and one girl having the disorder. What are the possible genotypes for each person in the family? Whenever it says possible, it means that there might be more than one answer for the question. Because this is a recessive trait, it means that any of the people that are affected by it have to have both of those lowercase letters. So for Tay-Sachs, let's just do lowercase t's to show that trait. So I'm going to put over here, T is going to be normal, our dominant, and then T, lowercase t, is going to represent Tay-Sachs. Oh, spelled it wrong, H. All right, so these people up here, because they're carriers, have to have one of each. They are normal, but they carry the trait. They are normal, but they carry the trait. These two people down here are where that possible comes into place. So this person can either be capital T and lowercase t, or they can be capital T and capital T, because this person got either this trait or this trait from one parent, either this trait or this trait from another parent. If I did a cross over here to show this, then you would see that there is a possibility that this child is going to have a capital T, a capital T, a capital T lowercase t, a capital T lowercase t, or a lowercase, which is what these two children have. This was a 25% chance, and this is a 25% chance every time they have a child. They happen to have two that got that 25% chance. That doesn't mean that this person has to be capital and this person has to be capital lowercase, because every time they have a child, that percentage goes into play. So this person can either be capital lowercase or capital. This person can either be capital lowercase or capital. And that's what it means whenever it says the possible genotypes. Last one for this page, human tongue rolling is a dominant trait. So I'm going to have capital R for my rolling. And those that are recessive cannot roll their tongues. I cannot, so I would have those recessive traits. Bob can roll his tongue, but his mother could not. So Bob has the ability to roll his tongue. That's represented here. If his mother could not, that means that she was recessive for the trait. If she is homozygous recessive for the trait, then she had to give her son this. So he is heterozygous because his mother could not. He's married to Sally, who cannot roll her tongue. If she cannot roll her tongue, then she is lowercase r, and we're able to find out what their children would have. Capital lowercase, capital lowercase. What is the probability that the firstborn child would be able to roll his or her tongue? Firstborn child is not necessary here. What is the possibility that their fifth child, their sixth child, their seventh child? The possibility is not going to change. That percentage will be there every time that they have a child, and that is going to be 50%. It's going to be a 50% chance that they cannot, and that they can. So 50%. Okay, two more. All right, this pedigree shows inheritance patterns for PKU, which is a genetic disorder. What is the genotype of the following individuals? So we have to figure out what these letters over here mean first. So this is the first generation. This is the second generation. This would be the third. This would be the fourth. We don't have a fifth down here. All right, and then the individuals are going to go from right to left. So this is 1 and 2. This is 1 and 2. This is 1. This is 2. This is 3. This is 4, on and on. What I'm looking for are the questions that it's asking me for up here. So 1, 1 is going to be this person, and then 3, 3 is going to be this person right here. So I have PKU. If I don't know anything about this PKU, I can look it up online, but I can also look at what I have going on here. I see that I have 2 females and 2 males that are affected, which means it's likely not going to be a sex-linked trait, so it's probably going to be autosomal. I have a trait here, and I have 2 children without that trait, and that tells me that it can't be dominant, because if this is a dominant trait, I'm likely going to have passed it down. Even if that doesn't show you that, if I didn't pass down the dominant here, it would not be able to pop up over here, because dominant can't just pop up out of nowhere into their children, and this child has it. So this has to be a recessive trait. So what is the genotype of this individual? If I found out that it has to be a recessive trait, then I'm going to show 2 lowercase letters, and again, the letter doesn't matter. I've chosen P for PKU. For this person over here, I know that they have at least 1 capital letter. I can find out some more from their parents. So they had the lowercase here, which means they had to pass this lowercase to this child. They had to pass this lowercase, one of either their lowercase or their capital, down to their children. So there's a possibility here that either it's a capital or a lowercase. I can also look at their children. So this person had to be a capital because he's normal, but he also passed the recessive trait down here. So this person is going to be a capital and a lowercase. So that's my answers for that one. And then, all right, so for number 10, wolves are sometimes observed to have black coats and blue eyes. Assume that these traits are controlled by a single locus and are located on different chromosomes. That is when you would use a dihybrid cross to show two different traits, but showing them as they would be passed down together. Assume further that a normal coat is capital N dominant to a black coat, which is lowercase, and brown eyes are dominant to blue, which is lowercase. Suppose a homozygote dominant alpha female and a homozygous recessive alpha male bred. Show the cross representing possible genotypes in the F1 and F2 generation. What are the possible phenotypes of the F2 generation? So first we want to do the F1 generation. I have a male that is homozygous dominant, so that is likely that it's going to be homozygous in both traits, cross with a homozygous recessive alpha female. That alpha part doesn't matter. But this is the cross that would be represented between two. Because of this, the only trait that the male is going to give to all of his children are going to be capital letters. The only trait that the female is going to give to her children would be that. So I can do the big dihybrid cross if I want to, but all of my children are going to come up with a heterozygous for each one of the traits, because dad can only give this and this, mom can only give this and this, so the baby is going to get this. So those are their pups. These pups are going to interbreed with each other, so I'm going to have, again, a heterozygous dihybrid cross, which I'm going to end up with. Again, you can do the whole big thing as I showed you before, but if you have two heterozygous breeding together for a dihybrid cross, you end up with the 9331. All right. And so that shows you the possible genotypes of those. So if you wrote that out, then it would be 9 are going to have a normal coat and brown eyes. 3 are going to have a normal coat and blue eyes, 1 dominant trait and 1 recessive trait, and then you do the opposite traits. So for this one, it would be the brown-eyed dominant with the black coat, which is the recessive, and then you're going to have one that has the black recessive coat with blue eyes. Hopefully going through some of these helped to show you how to do them, because the practice on these is going to help you a whole lot with your test questions. Please email me if you have any questions about these.